Hey, I'm Remy Pearson. Welcome to this episode of BraveHeart. I am so pleased that you're here. You can see on the photo, if you're on the visual, that we have an extraordinary woman that you may already know. Her name is Katy Milkman. She is the author of How to Change: The Science of Getting to Where You Want to Be. And I have definitely... I've read this book twice and I've listened to the Audible. I've listened to her podcast, which is called Choiceology. This is a very extraordinary woman, very successful at a young age. I read her CV, she had 4 pages of awards and accolades. She has done extensive research with Angela Duckworth, who is her friend and her colleague. She works with some of the leading behavioral psychologists throughout the world, doing extraordinary research on how we can improve our lives, the quality of our lives, and improve the outcomes that we achieve. Today, we're going to be chatting about her book, How to Change. But one of the things we didn't get to talk about was, and I want to mention it, is she is the co-founder and the co-director of Behavior Change for Good initiative at the University of Pennsylvania. And that's where 150 different researchers collaborate freely on what can help us achieve the very best from our lives. And she's under 40 and she has won extraordinary awards, as I mentioned. And her work to me is so simple to follow. So she writes in a way that's very accessible through lots of stories. And she talks about some of the biggest killers to us achieving what we want: procrastination, impulsivity, the desire to have what we want to have it now, forgetfulness, laziness, lack of confidence, lack of self-efficacy. So we cover all of this and so much more in this conversation. It was just delightful. I really enjoyed chatting with her, and I trust you do as well. And before we go to her, I just want to mention that we have just released the BraveHeart Journal. And so this journal is my version of How to Change. It is going through step by step how to step up your year and how to step up what matters to you. I go through the yearly goals, the 90-day goals, the monthly, the weekly. You can put your vision in here, your vision board, your purpose, your values, everything I do to set up my year and to set up what matters to me, I've put in this journal. And so there'll be a link around here somewhere and somewhere in the show notes for how you can start getting your BraveHeart Journal for yourself and as a gift. I hope you do, and I hope you get value from it. I'd love it if you did. And let me get out of the way and let's bring our phenomenal guest, Katy Milkman. Thank you so much for coming and chatting to us and sharing your message. And congratulations on How to Change: The Science of Getting Where You Want to Be. I thoroughly, really enjoyed this book, as you can tell from all my post-its. And you know you've made it into my club. I'm an avid reader. When the markings are in pen and not pencil, you know it's...
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you. And I really enjoyed your voice as well on the Audible. If anyone is into this kind of work, I think your voice on the Audible was fabulous. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was so fun to get to read it. I have to say, I did not know how much I would enjoy that, but I'm glad you like listening.
Yeah, I loved it. And you're a close friend, colleague of Angela Duckworth. So I've been scrubbing up on reading Grit again as well, knowing that you're very close colleagues. And she wrote your foreword, and you had her read her foreword, which was really lovely.
It was lovely of her to do that. She is a fabulous collaborator and friend and neighbor, and I'm just very lucky to get to work with her. It was very generous of her to do that.
She says, what Katy has learned is that the secret to a better life is not to eradicate the impulses that make us human. That's good to know, because I don't obsess at all about trying to do that, but instead to understand them, outsmart them, and wherever possible, to make them work for us rather than against us. And how would you describe the meta of your work, the promise of your work, the intentionality behind what you do?
Yeah, well, I think that what you just pulled out there is an amazing summary, and Angela does have a very special way with words. I think one of the most important mistakes that we make when we try to achieve our goals is not first stepping back and asking ourselves, what are the obstacles? What could prevent success? And then designing our strategy strategically, right? Strategy should be strategic, but often our strategies aren't. Often our strategies are just, oh, well, my friend used this goal setting app, or, I'm just going to push through and succeed. But when we actually develop a strategy, we recognize, I'm not going to get my workouts in because I find them miserable. And so I need to fix that. Or the reason that I haven't been taking my medication regularly is that I'm forgetting, and I'm going to fix that. Or even, there are deeper challenges, like I don't have the confidence to believe that I can achieve the career goals I've set for myself. And I need to build that confidence, and I need to build a team of supporters who will show me what's possible. Whatever the barrier, there really are a lot of scientific solutions out there, but most people don't take the time to develop a strategy. They simply look for a plan that lacks that component.
So why don't we, and I fall into this too, and I've listened to, I think, most of the podcasts you've been a guest on in the last 12 months. Overridingly, it was this theme. You call it me-search rather than research, which I loved. So part of what you've done is trying to get answers for yourself as well. And I feel the same. It's like, I'm a coach and I have a master's in this and I'm into it and I love it. And still I'll ask a friend who's ill-equipped with the answer, what do you do? Or I'll just Google for the first answer that's really popular on the Google search. And why? Why do we take shortcuts on things that we tell ourselves matter to us?
It's a really interesting and I think deep question. And I think there are a few different things that lead to these shortcuts. One is, whereas we're trained in school throughout our lives, right, to think carefully and break down problems when someone gives us long division or multiplication or, word problems, we're taught to think strategically about those kinds of issues. But we go through life without getting a playbook for thinking strategically about these other major life challenges. And I think that's a mistake, frankly, in the way that we grow up. We talk to people about them. We grow up having conversations with our friends and family, and that's how we solve our problems. And we use our best intuition and we use trial and error, but no one ever sits us down and gives us a roadmap or teaches us the science of how to achieve our goals. And so I think we get used to and accustomed to those non-strategic pathways. And that's, I think that's a mistake. I'd love to see that fixed. I think we can think scientifically about every problem we face in life, and we'll do better if we approach it that way.
One of the things that came up for me when I was reading your book and revisiting Grit and some other work related to your research was self-efficacy. Your focus is behavior, very much. It's what we do. It's not necessarily the step before. How do you place self-efficacy? And can you talk a little bit about that and how you put it into this frame?
Self-efficacy is such an important issue. If we don't believe that we can achieve our goals, we are very unlikely to achieve them. We won't put in the effort. We won't take the steps that are necessary. And so actually, it's the focus of a whole chapter of my book is this issue of confidence. There's a lot of wonderful research looking at how important it is to believe in order to achieve. I think one of the most fascinating findings in this whole literature is actually for medicine on the placebo effect, which shows that if a doctor prescribes a sugar pill for almost any condition, it causes meaningful improvement because we expect it to make us better. It literally has physiological benefits to believe you're getting healthier. And there are placebo effects in life. It's not just about medicine. When you have high expectations, you achieve better results. So I think it's really important to recognize then that we need to be making sure that one of the tools in our toolbook when we're trying to help people achieve their potential is building up their self-efficacy. And it's particularly an issue for women and minorities who tend to get messages that they maybe can't achieve as much in certain domains in life because of stereotypes. That can destroy self-efficacy, and it can lead to gaps in actual performance when they're there needn't be any. And so I think it's particularly important because it can create this unbalanced playing field.
I love that. And already we're off the path and not following the chapter. So but this is where I geek out, because my next thought where I go, Katy, is in your book, you talk about a very profound mentor in your life. And I can't help but feel that impacted your self-efficacy.
So tremendously.
So to me, there's this flow on. It's who's influencing, touching, and caring about us and our lives. And he knew how to show care about you personally as a human being, and only afterwards about your behaviors, about how you were doing your doctorate. Can you touch on that? And I tried today to recapture where he was in the story, because I really wanted to read out something, but that really touched me, your relationship with him and how even today it's impacting you in positive ways.
I am truly so lucky that I had just one of the most extraordinary mentors as a graduate student. His name is Max Bazerman. He's a professor at Harvard Business School. My book is not the first to center him in a chapter and talk about the way that he's impacted other people's lives positively. And I doubt it will be the last. He's done something really extraordinary, which is in business academia, which is, by the way, a predominantly male discipline. He has mentored students who've gone on to be professors, tenured professors at essentially every top institution in the country, in the United States, and globally, almost every top institution. And most of them have been women, which is also incredible. I know no one else who's had that kind of impact in our field. And the story I tell in the book is that everyone knows Max is an extraordinary mentor, that there's something really special and he has some secret sauce. And as I began to mentor students myself for the first time, I started to try to figure out what was it? What was the recipe? Because I'm an engineer and that's how I think. How can I decompose this? How can I solve this problem? I even wrote Max an email and I was able to find a copy of it over a decade ago saying, tell me, what is the recipe? And it was very funny because the response he wrote at the time seemed way off, but actually later I came to realize it was very profound. What he said is, it's not me, it's my students, these incredible people, they find me and I just don't get in the way. And he said, here's a few other things I do, but it's really this extraordinary set of people I've been so privileged to spend time with. I ignored that. It took me a while to come back around and realize that actually a big part of what made Max such a special mentor was the enormous admiration he has for each and every one of his students. He treats them as excellent scholars. He believes in them. He tells them he thinks they're extraordinary constantly. And at a time in life when there's a lot of criticism, that's part of the academic process. There's a lot of uncertainty. You're, being paid very little. You're not sure where your next job will be, or if there will be a next job, or if you'll even be able to finish this daunting task of a dissertation. To have someone who tells you, you are excellent, you have what it takes, I believe in you, constantly on your side is really extraordinary. He actually has a family tree and refers to his students as part of his family. And literally the family tree is on the wall with pictures of all his former students. Again, that message that, you are in this warm embrace and completely safe. And I would do anything for you, just like a parent would. It's really extraordinary. Another amazing thing though, that I realized he did beyond that builds confidence, that I think is really interesting, is that he has his more senior students serve essentially as mentors and collaborators to his junior ones. So we're sort of constantly training the people below us. And I never quite realized that was also part of the secret sauce until I did some research with a really brilliant professor at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University now. She used to be a postdoc at Wharton, and before that, Angela Duckworth's PhD student. And Lauren Eskris Winkler had this insight that maybe when we advise, we inadvertently are giving them a message, especially if the advice is unsolicited, that we don't think they've got the skills to figure things out for themselves. And in fact, a lot of people who are underperforming get a lot of unsolicited advice, and that it can be demoralizing. And what she realized when she was interviewing lots of underperforming salespeople and also underperforming students and sort of trying to figure out like, what would change things for you? What would help you pivot as part of her dissertation research? She heard this overwhelming chorus of insightful responses that people really, even though they were having a tough time, had incredibly wise things to say about what would help them turn things around when asked. And she wondered, what if we've sort of got the formula wrong? We keep giving unsolicited advice to people who are struggling, but what if instead of that, we actually put them in the position of mentors and built their confidence by doing this? And what if, in addition to that, not only would they get this confidence boost, but it would force people to introspect about what could work to achieve whatever goal they're struggling with, because they're going to have to give someone else who's struggling even more, who's even behind them, tidbits, wisdom. So you have to have something to say. And then once you've said it, you're going to feel hypocritical if you don't follow through yourself. So Lauren's done these wonderful studies, and I've gotten to be involved in one of them, showing actually that if you randomly assign people to give advice to others, it improves the advice giver's outcome. So advice giving helps you. And I think Max used that in his formula. He did a lot of putting his advisees in the role of advisors so that they built their confidence and started to sort of introspect, hey, what does make a great research paper? And they'd have to articulate that to a younger student and give feedback on the process of putting together a manuscript for a journal, which is what academic work is all about. So it's this very intricate process. And by teaching, we learn. And so I think my mentor was extraordinary in so many ways, but a lot of what he brought to my life was an ability to boost confidence. And I think it's no accident that those ingredients also led to so many successful female students and faculty in a world that was dominated primarily by men.
So what I've heard from what we've been sharing, and it came through in your book, How to Change, is I see a flow, which isn't how you've structured it. But for me, I always look for structure. I'm obsessed with structure. And I see a flow of, if I have the self-efficacy, which I can get from a support group, I will then seek more ways of having healthy strategies to get the change I want to get.
I think that's a lovely way to put it. And I think, for many people, self-efficacy can be lacking. There are plenty of people for whom it's not, right? And in that case, that's not where you need to begin if you want to make change. But if you're struggling, for many, one of the ingredients that's missing is believing you really can do this. And in my own life, I will say, not only do I have the magic of Max, but one thing that has really helped me that I now attribute to, in part, the power of advice giving, is I have a group of women who are at a similar career stage, all of whom reach out to each other when we get a request that's sort of outside the traditional demands of our roles, and we're struggling to make a decision. So we initially called ourselves a no club, because there's research showing women say no too little to what are called non-promotable tasks, to things that aren't valued by our organizations. We, organize the office holiday party, and we sit on the thankless committee, and that leaves us less time to do the things that are most valued and most likely lead to promotions and increases in pay, because we struggle to say no. So that is an empirical fact. Linda Babcock at Carnegie Mellon University has done wonderful work on this. So we formed this club sort of following her lead, which was a group of women who would reach out to each other and try to figure out, should I say no to this, and empower each other to say no more. The group is amazing for many reasons. The things I thought I would get out of it primarily were some accountability, some really wise advice from colleagues, excuse me, and also some social support. And all those things they've come through in leaps and bounds. They've been wonderful. But an added bonus that I didn't anticipate, and that aligns with this work on advice giving, is that in giving advice, I'm benefiting too.
Yeah, you got so much more out of it, pretty well is where it ended. So in your book, How to Change to Get Where You Want to Be, you were saying in one of the podcasts I listened to, you had a structure in mind when you put this together, from getting started through to impulsivity, through to procrastination and so on. How did you come up with this logic? Because I loved the logic. It's helped me already just reading this book. And this is kind of my profession. It still gave me some really good points. Why aren't I perfect yet? It gave me some really good pointers on how to just raise my game and perhaps attend to some areas I'd been neglecting. What was your thinking behind the structure? Because I think it really works for readers.
Well, first of all, thank you. And, you know, the story or the books itself opens with the story, story that is really actually important to me for so many reasons. It's the story of Andre Agassi's transformation from an athlete who was, you know, had a huge amount of talent and potential, but wasn't getting great results, to number one in the world, with still some bouncing up and down and still some rocky moments. But really, he became one of the greats. And there was a transformation that happened there. And I think it's a really lovely metaphor, frankly, for so much change and so much of the potential that's untapped. So what happened in his life is he found a coach, Brad Gilbert, who saw things differently and pointed out to him that he was not being strategic enough on the tennis court, that he was playing a game that was totally focused on him. He was trying to hit big shots, win every point, and wasn't thinking and responding to who was across the net from him, his opponent. And he wasn't being strategic and changing his game to face his opponent. And once Brad Gilbert pointed this out to him and took over as Agassi's coach, things really turned around. I love this story for a number of reasons. One is that I was a huge Andre Agassi fan growing up. Another is tennis is a huge part of my life, and it's a lens through which I learned many important life lessons. I was a very serious competitive player, not as serious as Andre Agassi, but pretty serious. And I think there's a lot of life lessons in the sport, and it perfectly encapsulates this lesson I have learned about change, which is that if we aren't strategic, if we don't think about our opponent and play that strategic game and figure out what are we up against, then we don't achieve nearly enough. So I open there because that's the through line of the entire book. And then the book is then structured around obstacles to change. What are the key obstacles and what are the key scientific solutions? What does evidence show works against these obstacles? And I want to actually note the book is focused on internal obstacles to change. There are, of course, plenty of external obstacles, and some of them are bigger than the internal obstacles. But what I study and where my expertise lies is with tackling those internal barriers. When you've got everything else figured out, or when you've got everything else set as well as you're going to, you can still be your own enemy. And then, what can we do about that? So the first obstacle I focus on is just the challenge of getting started. How do you begin? How do you drum up that motivation? And of course, where better to start than with where to start? And then from there, as you point out, I turn to the challenge of impulsivity, which for me is—
Can we do that? This is one of my favorite ones. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. What was your favorite one firstly? Was it, if you had a favorite obstacle that we can overcome based on the research, what would it be?
You nailed it. It is impulsivity. And by the way, that's where my work began in this field.
Yes.
As a graduate student, I was drawn to this issue. In fact, even before I was a graduate student, as an undergraduate, as a mere freshman studying introductory economics, I remember being so turned off by the field that I actually quit being a Bachelor of Arts student, went to summer school and decided to become an engineer because I was fed up with the economic model, which said we aren't impulsive, we don't have self-control problems, we get everything done, we're perfect little rational actor machines. And I thought, have you met me? Have you met any other humans? This isn't right. And so impulsivity drew me in. And actually in graduate school, when I learned that there were people studying impulsivity, writing models of how impulsivity might change the way we behave when we're taking out loans and, buying things on credit cards, that's what drew me in and literally brought me to the field that I'm a part of today of behavioral economics. So I love impulsivity. I live impulsivity. I'm very impulsive. I've done at least 10 impulsive things today. But I also find it really interesting because it is one where we tend to be pretty self-aware about this relative to some of our other foibles. So there are some strategies that people naturally adopt. And there's also a lot of tools that seem to help. So The first topic I want to mention is that most of us, when we face a challenge, we think, I have a big goal, I want to achieve it. Most of us, the approach we take is we think, all I have to do is just push through. I'll be able to get to the other end of this. Let me find the most effective way and follow the Nike tagline. I'll just do it and I'll succeed. And there's really fantastic work by Eilert Fishbach of the University of Chicago and Caitlin Woolley at Cornell University showing that is a mistake. A small fraction of people pursue their goals in the way that they think will be most enjoyable. And what Caitlin and Eilert have shown is that actually, if you coach people to pursue goals in ways that are fun, as opposed to coaching them to pursue their goals in the sort of just do it Nike effective mentality, you get better results for the fun. And the reason is people persist longer because they enjoy what they're doing and they don't quit. I think that is so profound and important, that if you are not enjoying what you're doing, whether it is at work, whether it is with your health, your family, anything in life, it's just an uphill battle to stick to it. And so you have to change the nature. You have to change the nature of the battle instead of trying to change the nature of yourself. You're never going to be able to push through all the hard things. That's just not human nature. So instead, you need to figure out a way to align what you enjoy in the moment with what's good for you in the long run, instead of having those two things clash. So I've studied one particular way of making things fun, but there are many ways. The way that I did it in my own life and that I've studied is through something I call temptation bundling. And that is linking something that you find maybe a guilty pleasure and only allowing yourself to do it when you do another activity that feels like a chore. So to be really concrete, you only get to binge watch your favorite lowbrow TV shows while you're on the treadmill. Or you only get to listen to your favorite podcast while you're cooking a fresh meal for your family. Or you only get to have a pedicure while you're catching up on overdue emails for work. Or you only get to go to a restaurant whose unhealthy hamburgers you crave when spending time with a difficult mentee. Pick your temptation bundle, but we can change the experience of something that would normally feel like a chore by linking it with a temptation. And we've done research, randomized controlled trials showing that this tool works. It helps us achieve more, whether it is, trying to get yourself to exercise more regularly at the gym. When people only have access to tempting audio content, for instance, like tempting audiobooks when they're exercising, that can help them exercise significantly more. And if students are working on tough math problems, they persist longer if you make the environment fun, contrary to the expectations of their teachers, and on and on. So there's all these different settings where if we can just change the nature of the task so it's fun, we see better results.
For me, what I do, if I'm doing something that I need to get through, I'll have a reward at the end of getting through that page. I think you give that example in the book. There was a sweet at the end of the page. For me, it's I get to go into the kitchen, make my favorite decaf green tea. I get to look at the ocean. I reset and then do the next. And I have to get through the next, whatever that amount is. And then so is that still temptation bundling if I'm rewarding myself after a short burst?
I love that question. This is where the science gets fuzzy because it's almost aligned in time. So is it the same experience or is it a little different?
To me, in my mind, it is. In my mind, it's kinesthetic. It's a feeling of this is flowing me towards my green tea and ocean.
If it changes the nature of the experience so that you're not dreading the activity, then I think that's temptation bundling. And then I think what you're achieving there is you've linked two things in a way that makes the dreaded one no longer dreaded. That's the whole idea of temptation bundling. But I do think there's a distinct category of solution, which can be you change the equation so that it's so costly not to engage in a behavior that's good for you. That you'll always make the decision to engage in. And this is sort of a different category of tool. Economists call it a commitment device.
We're getting to the next chapter. Let's do it. So we're getting to procrastination. This study blew me away. So let me ask the viewer, if you were told you could put money in the bank to save it, and take it out anytime you wanted, or you had the choice. This blew me away, to put it in savings, but it was fixed until a certain date that you picked and you could not access it. And there were no rewards for doing that. Which would you choose? And I'll give you 3 or 4 seconds to answer. Katy, can you reveal the answer?
Well, 30% of people think it's better to put some of their money in those accounts that have been locked, essentially, where you can't access it until you reach a predetermined date, or a predetermined
that you chose. You can,
you pick. Yes. So this is
you can penalize yourself to not get the money.
Yeah, you lock your money away. You lock it away from you so that you can't dip into it when you're tempted, when you think, oh, it'd be nice to buy myself some treats.
And you didn't have to do it. There was no, you did not, you were just asked, would you want to do this? But the thing that I loved is the next bit. What was the outcome at the end of the period of time? Go ahead. You can have the honors.
Thank you. This is wonderful research. So this was a random assignment study, which means they say, 1,000 people, let's say, were randomly assigned to have access to this account that they could put money into that would be locked up and they couldn't access. And another 1,000 people were randomly assigned not to have access. Okay, so now we're going to compare these two groups, one with access to the locked accounts, one without. And the group with access to the locked accounts, they save 80% more year over year than the others. And what's even more amazing about this is they don't even all use the locked accounts. Only about 30% chose to use it. And that's still, it was such a benefit that small fraction taking advantage led to a total of 80% more savings in the group. So these are really powerful tools. And it's very
That's a massive difference. Let's take that in. If you lock your money away, even voluntarily, the bank's not telling you have to, so it doesn't have to be a fixed term account. You can't access it. You will probably, based on the research, save 80% more than people who can access their money at any time. It's even, it's even better than that, Remy, because averaged into the 80% benefit are a whole bunch of people who didn't do this at all. So that's what's even more mind-boggling. You should, if you can convince yourself that you're ready to set money aside and really make it inaccessible to yourself for a fixed period of time, I think you can expect even larger returns than that. It's really a powerful tool. One of the things we teach our coaches around the world and our members is called bucketing. Have you heard about wealth bucketing?
Tell me more.
Yeah, wealth bucketing. It's not my phrase. I give full credit to Scott Pape for this, but we create buckets for investment, savings, emergencies, and so on. And every month, no matter what, it goes into those accounts and you pay all your household bills, and that's it. And then also you cannot use the credit card unless you can pay off the credit card at the end of the month. At the end of the 12 months, the members that are doing that are now out of debt, and in many cases have saved more money than they've ever saved before in a 12-month period. That's life-changing.
It's a commitment device. It's a similar philosophy, and it builds on what economists would call mental accounting. So in reality, of course, your money is completely fungible, right? There's no such thing as labeled money, right? There's no emergency fund to the extent that you're not literally putting them in, you're not spending it. Money is money. And the same, by the way, is true of time, right? Time is time, but we tend to label it in our minds and treat these things as if they can't move across boundaries and categories. And it can lead to some perverse decisions, but it can be useful as a tool. And in fact, Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in 2017, in part for his work on mental accounting, thinks one of the key reasons we do this is to help ourselves avoid giving into temptation. By creating these sort of artificial boundaries in our minds, we can create constraints that help us achieve our goals.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think this could be the chapter. Maybe it's not. It might be forgetfulness. One of the things that I do that really helps is I should have brought it. I have a diary page that's blank, and I have 8 symbols that are symbolic of the 8 things each day that I commit to do. And I'm allocating the time to it. And at the end of the day, my goal is to have 8 ticks.
I love that.
And it's around,
you mentioned you weren't sure if this relates to commitment or to the chapter on planning. And the reason you're not sure is because it's both. It's beautiful. You're solving two problems at once, because you are doing, as you said, you're pre-committing. You are basically giving yourself a little bit of mental anguish if you don't achieve the thing that you have explicitly said you'll achieve. And that's the nature of a commitment device. One of the reasons we don't procrastinate is when we set ourselves up to face some kind of penalty, whether it's embarrassment, because I have to tell someone, oops, I didn't do it by the deadline and I told you I would, or, I literally can't access my cash because I locked it away. So commitment works for those reasons, but also that kind of planning is a way of ensuring forgetfulness won't get in your way, because when we plan, we commit things more deeply to memory. And if we make an action plan where we say, if this happens, that's when I will take these steps, that is also particularly helpful for ensuring we'll follow through.
I can really see the flow here on how to be more effective in our lives and just save ourselves so much angst and unnecessary disappointment. And that leads into chapter 4, forgetfulness. And I'm going to take a quote out of your book, the research by psychologist Herman Ebbinghaus demonstrated how quickly humans forget in a study published in 1885.
Yeah.
And the data, the experience, it's been a while. We maybe need to update, but I think it's pretty true. We forget nearly half of the information we've learned within 20 minutes, 70% within 24 hours, and over 80% within a month. And if that is replicated across our lives, the other day I was about to go live on stage and there was a recording of me during the ad break. And I learned from me. I had forgotten what I was like, that's a really good point. And it was my point. I've asked for a transcript because I've forgotten a lot of what I was teaching. You seem to have phenomenal recall, Katy. I'm listening to you. I've listened to your podcast. You've blown me away with your recall.
I have terrible recall, but
oh wow, what does this say about mine?
I live and breathe this science. So and the part of what is different about it, not only do I teach it year in and year out to my MBA students, I know the scientists who built the canon. So also that really changes how easy it is to recall, because they're stories, which, by the way, if you ever want to remember something, stories are much stickier. So to me, these are characters. These are the stories of the people in my life, and that makes it much easier to remember the science. And I tried to write the book so that it would come to life for readers in that way, so that it would be memorable in that way. I love the Ebbinghaus study, even though, it's before my time. And yes, it's been a while since this research was done, and it was done. He was his only study participant. He was trying to memorize sort of gibberish, and then he would set a timer, and he'd try to memorize a list of gibberish words and set timers and see how much of it could he recall 15 minutes later, 30 minutes. It's really very clever. It's sort of a history of science type adventure. What's interesting is people have done the work since with larger samples and more even rigorous ways, and the results really do hold up, that so much of that short-term memory is quite quickly lost, which means that having a better sense of what does it take to embed information in our minds, if it's important and we want to make sure it doesn't fall away, that's a really powerful tool. And of course, you might say, oh, I just want that life hack for my work, or so I can impress people at cocktail parties with all of my knowledge. But it also is important for achieving your goals, because one big barrier is just, it's not top of mind at the right moment. You haven't embedded it deeply in memory so that you don't follow.
It's not a habit yet. It's not something you ritually turn to. Yeah. So what are the solutions? So given we forget on average 3 things a day, I think I can excel at that a little bit better than that.
I was going to say, that sounds low.
I can beat that.
So There's some boring ones and some more interesting ones. The boring ones we all probably live with now and are thankful for, which is, digital reminders are amazing. Timely reminders matter. By the way, if you remind someone to do something and it's going to be 10 minutes before they can do it, you're hosed because they'll have forgotten. You've got to make sure when you remind someone, it's at a moment when they can take the action you're reminding them to take. And that someone might be you. So, right. So set your timer or your alarm to go off, not when you're in the car, but when you could actually be a computer sending the email, you want to remind yourself to send. So reminders, really powerful, but that's not the only strategy. And sometimes we don't know exactly, when is the moment, when is the point on my calendar when I need to take action. And there's some really incredible research by a New York University psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer that's shown one of the most important things we can do when it comes to trying to achieve our goals is make what I call cue-based plans. And that is, if instead of saying, I want to exercise more next year, you actually form a cue-based plan instead of just an intention, exercise more. A cue-based plan is, okay, when will I do it? Where will I do it? And how will I get there? So you really map that all out. So not exercise more next week, not even exercise 4 hours next week, but on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday after work at 4 o'clock, I will head straight to the gym for a 30-minute workout on the elliptical while I listen to my favorite audiobook. And that is how you make a cue-based plan. It doesn't have to be a time, although times often work. And there's, I got to do one really interesting experiment as an early career scientist where we showed in a study with thousands of people that just sending mailings to remind people to get a flu shot, that's useful. But if you send a reminder and prompt people to write down for themselves privately, not as an appointment, but just in the privacy of their own home, to plan the date and time when they intend to get that flu shot, you see a very significant increase in how many people actually follow through. Because once we make these detailed plans, it embeds things more firmly in memory. We're more likely to actually put it on our calendar, set a reminder, and we're less likely to forget when the time comes. So it's particularly important for actions where you're going to have a limited window of opportunity for follow through, and forgetting could be a barrier. So voting is a big one in the US. Lots of people forget to vote, and there's wonderful.
It's not here. It's law.
That's right.
We all have to vote.
Situation. P.S. I'm a little bit jealous because we spend a huge amount of time and energy on get out the vote efforts. It doesn't. Anyway,
yes.
But that's a whole other.
Here you just get a fine. Here you just get a 200 whatever it is fine for not voting, and no one talks about it.
Well, that's the next thing, right? That's the penalty strategy. It looks
yes,
that can work too.
Yeah.
But in the U.S. before elections, everybody gets now, several calls and text messages asking them, when will you vote? Where will you vote? How will you get there? Because of great research showing that significantly improves turnout, just like it helps people get flu shots. So
for me to get to the gym, I used that and didn't realize I was using it. I will lay out everything for the gym. So I have it in my calendar on the phone, what days I'm going to the gym and doing what. I have it laid out at the front door a day earlier with everything thought about. So, and that way I know how I'm going to get there. I know what I need to get there. I know what time I need to leave my house, and I know exactly where to be. And that means it's happening every single week the way I want it to.
I love that. And it's important that everything that's a priority for us in life needs to get that level of attention instead of I'm going to start meditating, or I'm going to start checking in on my mom more often, or, I'm going to start showing up at meetings on time. We've got to figure out an actual plan. What are you going to change? When are you going to do it? How are you going to change it? Those details matter. And that's what Peter Gollwitzer's research has shown.
Love it.
People don't do it naturally often. And yet when they're prompted to, the outcomes are dramatically better.
I need to do it I've been meditating for years, but my meditation's improving. Now I realize I'm doing this. So present bias could be a problem. There are other ways I'd want to spend that 20 minutes to 30 minutes. So how do I overcome that? For me, it's making sure I know what I'm going to be using as a guided meditation. I know where I'm going to be sitting. I know what's going to happen at the end of it. I have planned through all the steps of it. And I give myself this little checklist of 8 things. And the first one is meditation. I want that first tick of the day. So I'm conspiring against my desire to do something else during that time. That's what's working for me. Yeah.
I love that. And it's also related to the research on habit, which shows just how important, by the way, positive reinforcement is. And we were talking about this a little bit in terms of temptation bundling and that you self-reward, but that's also a big part of what creates habits is repetition and making sure you celebrate those victories, whether it's, with a tick mark or some other approach, but that gives you that reinforcement that you crave. And then, and that's how you build the loop. So
and then, Katy, I may get lazy. Did you see how I segued to the next chapter?
I love that. I did see that. That was very, very well done.
My favorite study there was I think it was Penn Medical with the generic versus would you like to speak about that study? And I loved that study. That was so simple and it made so much sense. Take it away.
I love it too.
They will love it. The viewers will love this study.
I hope so. It's brilliant. So Penn Medicine, so I work at the University of Pennsylvania. This is the medical system that's attached, had this really incredible thing happen, which is they had been struggling to get their doctors to prescribe generic medications. Too many were relying on brand name drugs. And you might say, like, why does it matter if your doctor prescribes a generic versus a brand name? They're literally chemically identical. Well, it does matter because brand names are much more expensive. And that leads to additional medical costs. It also reduces compliance because patients can't afford to buy all the drugs they need, and then they aren't able to take the medications that in many cases are life-saving as reliably as they need to. So it is a really big deal. And every physician you ask in this medical system would agree they should be prescribing generics. They're chemically identical. This is the right thing to do. But the problem is in the moment you're trying to figure out what to prescribe your patient, they type it into a search box and they know the brand name. That's what comes to mind. Maybe they don't even realize that has been made into a generic yet. And so they are prescribing generics too infrequently. Okay, big problem. But then overnight, they went from having literally the worst generic prescription rate in the region of the country that was being tracked, about 75%, to almost 100% of their drug prescriptions were generic. It just, you can see a graph of it. It's like down here, right overnight. So this data, they were tracking their performance. They got this data, they got congratulated. And they said, what happened? Where in the world? What happened? So investigating, folks dug in and figured out how could this have changed? Well, it turned out that a savvy programmer who was inside their systems and was sort of figuring out how do we make things work better had made a small change. And that change was a really clever one. What they did is they changed the default way in which drugs were sent to the pharmacy. So a doctor writes a prescription on their computer, they type out, say, Lipitor, and they changed, it used to be that you could check a box and say, please send the generic version of Lipitor, this drug that is a brand name, to the pharmacy. They took away the checkbox and they said, it's going to be sent that way, but you can check a box to say, please don't send the generic version. And boom, now without taking any action, everybody's sending generics. They have a way out if they don't want to do it. It's a little box they can tick, but most people aren't because they mean to send the generic. That's exactly what they intended. And so what is so beautiful about this is what it says is when we know the outcome we want to achieve to the extent that we can automate it and make it the default, make it what'll happen when we take no action, the path of least resistance, we get amazing results. And this is something sort of magical in the US retirement savings system. Many employers now make it the default that people will send a portion of every paycheck into a savings account for retirement. As soon as you join the firm, you can say, I don't want that to happen, but the default is it will. And that turns out to increase retirement savings significantly compared to people who aren't automatically enrolled, who have to actually elect to start saving. You see roughly a 30 percentage point increase just because we make it the path of least resistance. So whether it's prescription drugs that are generic, whether it's saving for retirement, or really anything else, making it so that the sort of lazy, easy route leads to the best outcome has huge benefits.
Yeah. So where does nudging fit into that?
Yeah. So this is probably the most famous nudge out there. setting wise defaults. So nudging is a word that Richard Thaler, whose name I mentioned earlier, is a Nobel laureate, and a behavioral economist and friend and collaborator. Richard and Cass Sunstein wrote a book in 2008, I think it was, called Nudge. And the point of the book is that one way we can change people's decisions for the better is to structure environments with an understanding of their limitations so that they will get the best, so those limitations are working for them rather than against them, which PS is really the message of my book too. Their book is mostly focused on policy and how can policymakers use these insights to help people save more for retirement, to help people buy healthier foods, to help ensure that people drive less gas guzzling cars. How can policymakers use these insights about human behavior to design a world that's sort of more goof proof, if you will, right? So even if you're not thinking deeply and carefully about everything, good outcomes will ensue. And
so it's like the sign in the hotel that says 70% of people who stay in your hotel room reuse their towel.
Exactly. And that just triggers the automatic reaction. Oh, everybody's doing it, I should too. I guess this is the norm and I don't want to, that must be the right behavior. So nudging, I think, is really a close cousin of what I'm writing about, because what my book is trying to share is the insight that similar tools that policymakers might use to try to help individuals end up with better outcomes and to help, lead to more environmentally friendly behavior and so on. Those tools can be harnessed by the individual to help themselves achieve better outcomes. You can set, for instance, defaults in your own life. You can temptation bundle. So once you have an understanding of this, not only can policymakers design a world where that's less foolproof, you can design your life so you achieve more. So they're really related topics. And actually, Richard likes to he said that I wrote a book about snudging. Which I'm not sure. I'm glad I didn't call the book Snudge. But self-nudging is what, anyway, so snudging.
So we're going to finish on, I think this might be my favorite. I know I said it was impulsivity, but confidence. This chapter, the housekeeper study, I loved. And we started our conversation with this, but the placebo effect, this idea that if we expect we are more likely for it to happen. Would you mind talking for a couple of minutes about the housekeeper study? I call it the housekeeper study. Please forgive my very, very informal way of addressing it. It's my really favorite study in the book.
Yeah, I love this study. This is research that was done by Ali Crum, who's now at Stanford, and Ellen Langer of Harvard. And it's really just brilliant. And what they did is they realized that our expectations shape our outcomes. And they want to just show that in a setting beyond giving patients sugar pills and telling them this should cure your headache. And they did it in a really interesting study. They did it with housekeepers. And what they wanted to do was see what would happen if they told housekeepers truthfully that the work they do each day is an incredibly good physical workout, that it meets the CDC's definition of great exercise. So they randomly assigned some housekeepers to get this information. Every day in your work, you are doing fantastic exercise. And then another group of housekeepers wasn't given that information. They just went about their jobs as usual. And then a month passed, and then they measured the various health markers for those housekeepers who had been in the study, both those who had been told about the health benefits of their job and those who hadn't. They looked at things like blood pressure, weight, waist size. And incredibly, what they found is that the housekeepers who had been told, look, your work is exercise, you're getting these benefits from your job that you maybe weren't appreciating, those people had realized more of those benefits. They were fitter, they were in better shape, they were
blood pressure went down,
all of these things significantly. And you first read the study, you first hear about the study, and you're like, is it a miracle? Is it, is it some sort of like hypnosis? What's going on? But I actually think there's a clearer answer, which is when you start thinking about your work differently, you start thinking this is physical activity, you make different decisions. You're excited to get to push that, push that iron a little harder, push the vacuum a little harder, take the stairs up and down. And you're making different choices about how you use your body at the job you're on, because you're excited to have the opportunity to do this healthy thing. And so people are doing their jobs in a different way when they're thinking about them as exercise, rather than as, I have to get this done. This is a chore and it has no ancillary benefits. And I think that point about how important our mindset is and the way we frame things to ourselves, it's so much broader. I will say, just in terms of physical activity in my own life, I live in a townhouse and I have to run up and down the stairs in order to get the laundry. And after reading that study, I say to myself, I am so lucky to be getting this exercise passively as I walk up the stairs instead of growling about walking. And that is meaningful. But also in work, in life, in anything you're doing, when you change your mindset about what you're achieving and what's possible to achieve, you can see different results. And that's really the lesson.
I loved it. I really loved that study. It gives us so much possibility that we can shape our own lives. Now, we're out of time and I want to respect your time. So viewers, we haven't done the final 2 chapters on conformity and on changing for good. And I really recommend, whilst we've talked about it, we haven't really done how to change all the justice. We've covered 4 anecdotes out of hundreds. You've done a beautiful job bringing this science to life and making it so accessible. Is there anything you feel that we need to close on particularly? If you had one message to somebody who was wanting to instigate change in their lives, or you can have 2, but.
Well, one thing I would tell you is that the moment can matter. And that I've done some research that on the topic of fresh starts, that there are moments in our lives that feel like new beginnings. And when we're particularly open to change and motivated to begin, those moments come about every new year. That's part of why we set New Year's resolutions. Every birthday you celebrate, every time you come home from a vacation, every Monday. Dates, anything that feels to you like a transition point can be your fresh start moment. And those are particularly opportune times to decide to make a change and to sit down and be deliberate about planning your strategy. So I would just encourage you, and I'm saying this to your listener, but you too, Remy, although I think you've got everything figured out, don't change. But anyone who wants to make a change, because we all want to make a change, look for those fresh start moments. And then I hope these tools can be helpful to you.
One of the things we didn't talk about, but you value highly, is having a group of people around you who are encouraging. My recommendation for getting this book is I felt you were on my team. So you're now part of my encouragement team, because you have a way of writing and communicating that I feel very encouraged and inspired. And I definitely feel I can do it after hanging out with you through your Audible and your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. I'm so glad it made you feel encouraged. That was certainly my goal. I hope everyone who reads it or listens will feel the same way and will achieve more than they would have otherwise.
Yeah. And now this book's available everywhere, my understanding. So I went into a bookstore, it was available, it was everywhere I was looking. So we need to create an impulse to get the book, with it on our list, and make it a default setting to get it, and make it really, and then bundle it with something else that we're doing.
Bundle it with ice cream.
I think it is the pleasure reward. I'll bundle it with exercise because it's the reward.
That's wonderful to hear you say that.
Thank you so much. You're a pleasure to chat with. I knew you would be. You're just delightful. Congratulations on all your success. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.